Welcome back to the George Plaster Show. Alongside Kelly Holcomb, I'm Billy Derrick. And love them or hate them, the Vols are headed to Omaha after they knock off Southern Miss in Hattiesburg yesterday. And you know what time it is. We're checking in with Tony Basilio from the Tony Basilio Show. You can hear him weekdays from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. Eastern Time in Knoxville, 99.7 FM, 1040 a.m. Tony, can you believe it? The Vols are going to Omaha.
Look at me. Guys, I was up till 3 o'clock in the morning talking about it. The game started at 10, right? And then
that didn't help.
Eastern time. And it ends around 1 Eastern time. And then I was up till about 3. We went off the air at like 2:45.
You need that caffeine right about now.
I look like somebody beat me with a freaking ugly stick. I'm going to look worse tomorrow. Kelly will tell you, Billy, as you get older, it's not the first day when you get over a certain age, but the first day is bad enough. The second day is brutal. Am I lying, Kelly? You pay the price that second day.
No, absolutely. It's always the second day. The first day is bad, but the second day is awful.
I mean, I am so tired right now. I can't see straight. But, I just can't believe. And, Billy, I was kidding you several weeks ago on here about your podcast that you do, which you're excellent, by the way. I wasn't blowing smoke at George. I bet this show's improved this week without George being there. But I'll say this. You guys were kind of like celebrating the demise of Tennessee that I thought was coming. I thought it was coming that week. But you guys were the launch pad. Vanderbilt became Tennessee's launch pad.
Yeah.
So you deserve a share, man. I know that it's got to make you feel good from a Vanderbilt perspective that you launched Tennessee.
And you talked about it, Tony. Vandy went 13-12 after that sweep. Mm-hmm. And it starts to get into their heads, the fans' heads. I was in the outfield, Tony. I think I told you this. Every Vandy fan had the Tennessee Clemson game on their phones in the outfield, watching, hoping and praying the Vols would lose. And they keep coming through this postseason.
Crazy.
I mean, it's something special, and you need a little bit of luck. And I'm not. They beat Clemson fair and square, but in the postseason, Tony, as you know, you need a little bit of luck on that side. They got the bounces, and Tennessee was able to take down Clemson. After that, you feel a whole lot more confidence about your team going down the stretch and saying, "Hey, we beat the number 4 team of the country. We can go head to head against anybody."
Well, and what's crazy, Billy, is they hit 205 in that regional and still won. 205 as a team against Southern Miss. They went on the road, hit 205 as a team. Their hits were loud. They hit the ball out of the park. Blake Burke hadn't hit a ball in weeks. Zane Denton, who you see there, big shot last night. 3-run homer. A 1-0 game becomes 4-0, and at that point, the game's over. Middle innings. Game's over. And there you see Chase Burns, the mid-stater, who it was as into that moment last night as he was that Friday night against Vanderbilt when he came out of nowhere and just looked like a heel wrestler out there on the mound. And he did it again last night. His mannerisms, he threw the day before, but he was so juiced up for that opportunity last night that he threw the ball 102 miles an hour. He went over 100 a couple times, but 102 miles an hour to finish the first batter in that first series. And then they dogpile. And, that series was really something because it was marred by all the rain and hours and hours and hours of delays. Yesterday's game was delayed 4 hours. Of course, on Saturday, they had a washout where they had to resume a game top of the 5th inning. So they played 2 on Sunday. And the weather ended up really helping Tennessee because it helped deplete the left-hand arms in Southern Miss's pen. And it really helped Tennessee to get through.
And it's interesting, Tony. Tennessee goes on the road for a super. Obviously, Tennessee fans, a lot of them were upset about that. Mm-hmm. But you have a home super at home. That's a different type of pressure in any sport. I mean, college basketball, neutral sites, football, with the playoff, now you'll be able to host that first round. So there's probably new pressure there. But different in any other sport at the college level, you host a regional or a super, especially a super, you can taste Omaha already. You saw it last year with Tennessee. So do you think it helped this group? Maybe if they host Penn at home, maybe the pressure goes right back on this team and they feel differently. But they go back on the road in an atmosphere like Hattiesburg that's probably similar to Knoxville, where you got, a bunch of rednecks yelling at you every 5 seconds. I mean, do you think that helped this club where in the bullpen, Chase Burns is listening? I think they call it the right field roost. They're all talking trash. I mean, I think that helped this team. They're back on the road. And in Omaha, again, another road type atmosphere likely against LSU.
I think that's a thing in college baseball across the board, not just here. Tennessee failed in that spot last year. Southern Miss failed in that spot. Southern Miss hosted Ole Miss last year, and Ole Miss went down there and beat them twice and then got through to the World Series and won the World Series, as we know. But, Tennessee, the pressure last year of the moment with Notre Dame was just – it was profuse. It was as thick as the humidity last night. They played that game, and after the storms, the humidity was hovering around 100%, which seems impossible, but that's what the air was like there. And the air of oppression in that Notre Dame series last year, when the kid from Notre Dame, who had 2 home runs all year, fisted a ball out the short porch in Lindsey Nelson Stadium. I've had people that were on the team say in the dugout, you could feel the tension of the crowd that was transferred to the team. I think that happens to home teams in baseball. I think it's happened to the Atlanta Braves down through the years, where their fans, until a couple years ago when they broke through, but their fans expect almost, we're going to see my guys choke or our guys choke, and it's transferred down to those players. And I really do think that's a real thing in baseball. And I think being away from home this week was an advantage for Tennessee. I think that's accurate.
Well, and Zane Denton has been a big part of that, a big part of taking fans out of the game against Clemson. Hits an absolute silencer home run. You felt like Tennessee, they're going to win this game. Crowd's out of it. Southern Miss, he mashes one to right center field. I mean, you had to really crush that ball to get it out of there. I mean, Maui Huna also, but that was as thick of a night last night in terms of the air. And so to get that ball out was crazy. So Zane Denton, I want to start with Denton, and then we'll go to Chase Burns, and we'll get it over to Kelly. Zane Denton, we say he's been the hero, Tony, in this postseason. I mean, he's another local kid that came out of the mid-state, and he's a guy that without him, Tennessee's probably not in this spot right now.
Totally agree. Transfer from Alabama, and it took him a while. He's had a kind of not a rough year, but sort of an uneven year with the glove, uneven year at the bat. But he has really come up in money spots with key hits. And again, Tennessee hit 210 as a team and got through a super regional, which just shouldn't be. Tennessee fell down 4-0 in game 2 in the second game, and on Sunday with Dolander on the hill. A rocket was hit down the third baseline. Denton somehow made the play. It was a double saving play. You had 4 in already, and you were about to get another runner to second base, and he was a long way from getting out of that inning. I think if that's a double there, if he doesn't make that play, I think that becomes a 6 or 7 run inning. I think Dolander's out of that game, and I think we're talking about a Tennessee team that came up short in the Super Regional. Baseball's a game of inches, but the last 2 weekends, he's saved their bacon.
Let's get Kelly back in here. Go back to that picture of Chase Burns real quick, David. I mean, go back. I don't know if you've seen the video, Kelly, but I mean, I thought this guy was going to go into cardiac arrest. This was all the way to the dugout, screaming. I mean, this type of emotion from a guy that threw 102 miles per hour, Kelly, there's nobody in the country wants to face that.
Well, normally a guy, they're kind of like quarterbacks. Pitchers they've got to kind of stay even keel. Now I know some of the closers come in and they've got like different personalities, but man, when you see a guy get like that, you can get 2 up, and that's kind of what it seems to me. But he's hyped up, and man, what I'm going to ask you, Tony, is this: like some of the decisions that Tony Vitello has made in certain situations this year have been unbelievable. Like the Clemson game, with some of the situational things that he took guys out of the game in that extra inning game. And then the other day, you're talking about the Dolander kid, like he gets 4 hit on him. He gets 4 put on him in the third or the fourth inning. Well,
Yeah.
He doesn't take him out. And then, man, he becomes a juggernaut the rest of the game and is striking people out left and right. And you look at the Ahuna kid from Kansas, you look at the Zane Denton kid from Alabama, the Lindsey kid from Charlotte. It just seems like this year he's making all the right moves at the right times in games, even with bringing kids in. It just seems like it could be the year that they win this whole thing.
Well, I mean, there's a little piece of that lingering in the background. You are a strike away at Clemson.
Yeah.
From going into the loser bracket and probably going home. You're down 4-0 in the second game. You've already dropped the resume game. You're in game 2. You're in 4-0. You're fighting for your life. Tennessee, after that play that Denton made at third, outscored that team 13-0. Now, I don't think that was on anybody's bingo card, okay, or your Singo card, because I know you play Singo. But at the end of the day, Tony Vitello just has a knack about him. This program has been to 5 Super Regionals. He's been to 3 of them. This program has been to the NCAA tournament 13 times in its history. He's been to 4 of them here. This guy's just getting started. And he's polarizing. Billy Derrick and his guys that were doing that podcast, they hate Tony Vols. I get it. I'd hate him too if he wasn't my manager. But guys like him in sports, you see them, Kelly. They just have a knack. Sports are a weird thing because everybody trains. Most people work hard, but some people win and some people lose. Yeah. When I played, I lost all the time. guys that win just have a knack for winning. Chase Burns, here's a good example. Chase Burns in the Clemson game loads the bases. He can't locate. Can't command anything. Bases are loaded. Tony goes out there. He goes out there to get him. Give me the ball. No. Give me the ball. No. Get off my mound. Tony told me that's the only time, only one other time in his life is he let a kid say to me, get off my mound. He said, I had a feeling.
Yeah. That's what I'm talking about.
I looked in his eyes. I saw that. I saw, get off my mound. I saw that look in his eyes. And when that kid made that third out, when that kid got out of that thing with a double play ball, Tony was the first guy out of the dugout. He never does that, to run onto the field. You don't see guys that manage these games, but he was just like, I think he was as surprised as anybody that the kid got out of it. It's big time, man. It's, you trust your kids, and somebody goes out and does something like that. It's pretty big time.
Well, that's why they're winning right now. I mean, players love coaches that are in the battle with them. And that's just, you talk about another situational decision. Well, Chase Burns was a starter, and then he's not playing. Well, he puts him in the bullpen, and then what has he done? I mean, it's just like he's got a crystal ball this year, and he's making all the right moves at the right times.
And I don't think Burns is like going to the bullpen, because that's like a demotion.
Yeah.
These guys want to get the ball every – whatever it is, regular intervals. But the bullpen, the closing role just agrees with Burns. He's got that dog in him, man. He has got that closer. My baseball lifer friends say, you ask them, what's the hardest thing to do in that sport? The hardest 3 outs to get are the final 3 outs in any of those games.
Yeah.
And you watch it down through the years, you see it, This guy got the final 9 last night, or final 8. They spotted him out one of the innings. He came in with, and that's when he blew the side away, the middle of their lineup. That's when he did all that stuff he was doing coming off the field. But hey, Tennessee and LSU Saturday night is going to be, it's going to be a hell of a game.
Well, since you brought that up, I'm going to ask you another question, but since you brought that up, let's go to that. Like, they lost 2 out of 3 in Baton Rouge, but the last game that Tennessee played down there, they beat them 14-7.
Yep.
So is that going to give them a little bit of confidence going into this thing, knowing that, hey, we can not only beat them, but we can really beat them, So LSU's really good. We know that, but Tennessee's really good, and they seem like they're peaking at the right time. So what do you see in that? What do you see in that contest?
LSU, baseball is just a game that's matchup dependent. And Paul Skeens is phenomenal, and he's going to get the ball. And so Tennessee's going to get an opportunity against the best pitcher in the country,
right,
to knock him out. And Tennessee's got to run into a couple. I mean, really, honestly, the way they're hitting the ball, they've got to get lucky against him.
Yeah.
That's the recipe. But that's the nature of it, Like last year, Notre Dame had to get lucky against Tennessee. Burns gave up a long ball. Kid hit the ball out of the park, and nobody was hitting him last year. So the point is that it's what makes baseball such an interesting game, because Tennessee could win Saturday. I mean, I wouldn't bet on it with the pitching matchup of Lindsey versus Skeens, but crazier things have happened and will happen. But it's a great matchup. I just wish they could figure out a way to get these games in a little earlier. Like yesterday, they knew a storm was coming.
Yeah.
And these geniuses from the NCAA, instead of just playing the thing at 11 a.m. in the morning, getting those 2 teams out of town, getting one of them on to Omaha, which is the normal thing to do. That's the normal thing to do. No, we're going to wait. We're going to say it's a 6 o'clock first pitch, knowing they knew it. We all knew it, that there's going to be a storm there. They couldn't start till 10 Eastern. I mean, when your fan base, most of them, Kelly, are asleep when you're playing a game to go to a College World Series. I mean, are you growing your sport? That's stupid.
It's the NCAA. They do stupid things. They've always done stupid stuff. I remember my college coach talking about the NCAA back in the early 90s, how ridiculous they were.
Yep.
So here's my last thing, because I know Billy wants to get back to you, but let's go back to Tony Vitello. I just saw an interview with him, and I like what he does. He doesn't go into the locker room because he says that that's a kid's safe haven. And that's pretty cool to me. And it seems like that they had a players only meeting, and it might've been, the Vanderbilt deal, because you talked about it earlier. It seemed like the Vanderbilt deal was the catapult to get them where they are now. But the other day, I mean, they lose the first game 5-3. They come back the next game and they're down 4-0. I mean, they're finding something from the kids taking ownership of this. And I think Tony Vitello has figured it out. And he's figured his team out with all the decisions that he's made. But it seems like that he's giving them ownership of this thing. And that's pretty mentally tough when you're already down a game and you're losing 4-0 and you come back and just blast these guys. So he's doing something right.
Well, and 2 months ago, prior to that Vanderbilt series, Tennessee never does that. The craziest thing about the Vanderbilt series is, if you go back to that Friday night, which totally changed the season for both teams. Because I think Vanderbilt's probably still playing right now, even with all their injuries and how thin their pitching is. I still think they're playing if that whole thing doesn't happen. It's almost like they never recovered from that. And Tennessee is still doing this after that series. Yep. And the weird thing is, both home runs in that 9th inning were true freshmen, and neither of those kids has played much since that game. Neither of those kids has really played a lot of baseball for him. There were a couple situations last night where I thought they would use one of the freshmen, either Dreiling or Kavaris Tears, and especially Dreiling, but they didn't. And Tony has a saying, Kelly, that's interesting. He says, people think I'm a coach, but to my kids that play on my team, I consider myself a teammate.
It's the way he acts, too.
Yeah, and what it means is, during the game, I'm not going to jump your ass. I'm not. When it's time to talk about something, we'll talk about it. We'll turn the film on, and we'll all look at it. But in the moment, Because I asked them earlier in the year, they kept dropping pop-ups. I said, Tony, you're Italian. How do you sit there without freaking out? I said, Tony, your guys urinate me off watching them. I know they urinate you off. And he says, well, I'll tell you. He said, I've learned to control that down through the years. And when I got this head coaching job, my philosophy is the guys that choose to play on my team are my teammates. And then he says, how would you like your teammate to treat you? You know,
Pretty
as
good.
coaches think that coaching is riding people, kind of, you know, at times destroying them. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
Like that kind of old school notion.
Yeah.
And he's pretty new school, but he's not afraid to change lineups. He's not afraid to if you're not performing, you know, there's none of that. It's not like, oh, we're all friends here. But he's done a really incredible job, Kelly, to get this team, who heading into that Vanderbilt series, they were not getting along with each other. I mean, that was a season going nowhere really quickly. This thing, in my time of doing what I'm doing, 30 years, all the sports seasons I've watched around here, that's the best coaching job I've seen in any of these sports, to get these guys to Omaha. It's insane.
Well, I know that you would love to play for a guy like that. And I know Billy's probably upset because that was the one thing that Vanderbilt could beat Tennessee at.
Yeah.
But it's no more. I mean, it's no more. It's a rivalry now. And I can understand why, you know, the Vanderbilt squads and the people that are not in the Tennessee program do not like Tony Vitello, because he is brash. He's bold. He's going to say what he means. And I can understand that, but it's definitely a rivalry now, Billy. So you better get used to it, bro.
Oh, I'm buckling up. I'm ready to roll. But Tony, I've said this before. This is the way you recruit the opposite way of Vanderbilt. I mean, no Tennessee baseball coach had really done what Vitello had done. He came in here and said, okay, I've got to find a way to beat Vandy. Let me go do the polar opposite of everything Tim Corbin of that program does. I don't know if he actually thought that way, but I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if he looked at the situation in the state and said, okay, let's do things a little differently and get some of the other Tennessee kids who may not want to go to Vandy. Let's get them over to Tennessee. And I think that's exactly what he's done. Now, I don't know if that's what he said to himself, but that's kind of what it feels like a little bit. I mean, they're the polar opposite.
Well, it's interesting, right? And it's almost like with Corbin, I'm looking at how they're, you know, in the postseason, right? You say to yourself, well, how does that happen? And it's almost like one approach is just kind of let it happen, which is Tony's deal. And then one approach is just to grind your team down. And I don't know. But I'll say this, and you know this, Billy. Before Tony got here, Chase Burns is pitching for Vanderbilt. And if Chase Burns is pitching for Vanderbilt, guess what? They're still playing today.
Yep.
One guy can make that much of a difference. It's a truth.
That's the type of kid that Vandy would usually get. Yeah.
Yeah.
Tony, one more.
The major league pitcher, especially out of the mid-state, 10 times out of 10 was going to Vanderbilt.
And look at Vandy's pitching. Vandy's pitching is not as dominant. I mean, that's how it's been. But I mean, it helps the rivalry, Tony. I'll say this: it helps baseball in the state of Tennessee.
Sure.
I think that both are as elite as they are. But one more: the College World Series has a Jello shot challenge at Rocco's Pizza. Last year, Ole Miss got 18,000, I think, Jello shots. Of course, people with a lot of money, they'll buy them up, giving to fans. What's your sense on the amount of orange that might go to Omaha and make the trip? Obviously, if Tennessee keeps winning, you got to believe they'll make the trip. But how many for that LSU game Saturday night you think might make the trip up?
You know, those fans, our fan base is incredible, the way they travel. And they, as you guys know, they travel to everything. And they've been so underserved down through the years. I think there'll be a pretty nice crowd. The thing with LSU and baseball is like a religion to those people. And they're spending like drunken sailors at it. And they're going to continue to poach players, poke players off people's rosters. And so they're going to have a huge contingent of fans. Hey, look, that World Series is getting ready to happen. Every one of those teams, 6 of the 8 are what you'd call elite baseball teams. Tennessee's side of the region is that Wake Forest team that's hammering the ball right now with very good pitching. You've got the LSU team who have the top two draft picks in the Major League Draft, one a position player and one Paul Skeens. You have the University of Tennessee, and you have that Stanford bunch that I wouldn't bet against. That's their side of the bracket. That's absurd.
That's insane. There's a lot of talent all over the bracket, but that top part of the bracket, good luck to who gets out of that, because you're going to be beat down. But yeah. LSU, Tennessee, Saturday night, I can't wait. I mean, there's a lot of talent on that field as well. Tony, real quick before we let you go.
Hey, Billy,
yeah.
Before you go, now tell the listener now who you cheering for in that game, Billy. Come on, Tony. I want to know, Billy. Now I want to know who you're cheering for.
You know the answer to that, Tony.
He's going to be wearing purple and gold behind the scenes.
Do you believe, Kelly? You believe us? You
Tony,
believe I have a rub
absolutely.
Guy that he wouldn't cheer for my Volunteers?
Oh, absolutely. He is not cheering for the Vols. If they were playing
it for one night, Billy, just one night, man.
No,
I'm so high on you, and if you were stock, I would buy you, man.
Tony, I'll admit
your future.
I'll admit, I was at my uncle's house watching the Tennessee-Alabama game, and something came upon me. I felt a sense of pride that Tennessee had beaten Alabama in football. And I said, what the hell? This is Alabama. Let them beat Alabama one year. So that's really the only night. I was singing Rocky Top. That's the only night. And my brothers are sitting here saying, what are you doing? But that's the only time I'd ever cheered for Tennessee.
Tell Tony what you texted me this morning about Tony coming on the show. You told him he was going to get on to you.
Oh, yeah. No, I love it, though. I mean, this is what rivalries are about.
Yeah.
I mean, Vandy, Tennessee baseball, this didn't used to be a rivalry. I mean, nobody cared about Tennessee baseball.
And Billy, when I heard you guys podcast that day, because I played a snippet of it after that weekend series, and I said on my show, I said, listen to the level of hatred that these guys have for Tennessee's baseball team. But it's all in good fun, you know. And the truth is, you need an adversary in these sports.
Yeah.
I'll give you an example. Florida right now in football is not good. They're not. Mm-hmm. And Tennessee's getting ready to play them. And
that's going to get ugly.
Smash them into the ground. They should, right?
Yeah.
And it's almost like you think to yourself, man, it's better when we're both really good. And as long as those two head coaches are at Vanderbilt and at Tennessee, when those two teams get on the field and play baseball, it's going to be worth watching. And Vanderbilt's going to get Tennessee some, and Tennessee's going to get Vanderbilt some.
And, Tony, think about here in 3-4 years, both of them will have new renovated stadiums. I mean, It's going to be awesome getting together and watching these two teams get after it. I love it. But, Tony, again, how can everybody watch you this week? And I'm sure you'll be having a watch party of some sort for Saturday night.
Yeah, so tclub.team is my website. We're on after every one of these Tennessee baseball games. We've been going the whole postseason. And the last couple of days, I'll tell you, with all the starts and the stops, and one of my guys said last night, that was a 3-game series that felt like it was 7 games, because that is what it felt like with all the starts and stops and rain delays and this and that. But Billy, I really appreciate you. And again, man, if you were a stock, I'd buy you. And I don't know what Georgie boy's paying you behind the scenes, but I would double it. You're my man.
I'll have to talk it up with George. See what
you're my guy, man.
That. But Tony, get some sleep. Tell Tony to lay off Vandy next year too.
Oh, come on. I'll try
for one season. Come on.
Hey, by the way, tclub.team is my website. tclub.team. Check us out. And I'm really not this tired as I appear. But, thank you, guys.
Thanks, Tony.
Thank you. Bye.
He is the best. Tony Basilio, just an electric factory, just like Chase Burns.